Billionaire caught having an affair in a hotel room with Mistress by pregnant wife on a business trip. A storm brews behind the gilded walls of luxury, where a picture-perfect marriage unravels under the weight of secrets. Clarissa, pregnant and determined, carries not only a child, but the hope of a future she believed would remain untarnished. Her billionaire husband, Leonardo Quinn, stands at the pinnacle of success, his name whispered in the corridors of power, his face on the covers of Forbes. Yet, behind every polished photograph lies an untold story. That night, in a lavish suite at the Four Seasons Hotel in Manhattan, Clarissa steps into a confrontation that will shatter illusions, ignite betrayal, and change their lives forever. Clarissa Quinn had always been the type of woman who believed in the sanctity of marriage. She was a steadfast pillar beside Leonardo, whose financial empire had skyrocketed in recent years, drawing both envy and admiration from business magnates around the globe. From meticulously planning philanthropic galas to supporting his bold ventures in technology, Clarissa was more than just a supportive spouse. She was his confidant, advisor, and occasional moral compass. When she discovered she was pregnant, Clarissa's joy knew no bounds. The child was a testament to years of devotion through the ups and downs of building an empire. It wasn't always easy. Leonardo's work required him to travel constantly. He was often so busy that Clarissa sometimes felt more like a partner in business than in love. Yet her unwavering faith in their bond carried her through it all. She'd brush aside the lonely nights spent waiting for him to return from yet another investor meeting in Dubai, Hong Kong, or wherever the glimmer of new deals beckoned. One summer evening, Leonardo invited her to celebrate the 8th anniversary of one of his greatest achievements, the successful IPO of his flagship tech company at a quaint bistro in Midtown. Candlelight danced on their table as he held her hand, promising he would always be there for her and the baby. Clarissa's heart fluttered with happiness, certain that their life was only going to grow brighter. But an unexpected invitation to a conference in Chicago forced her to pack her bags a mere week later. Leonardo couldn't join her. An urgent deal required him to meet investors in Manhattan. His tone had been apologetic, but also peppered with excitement. He had a groundbreaking pitch that could revolutionize data analytics. Clarissa understood. After all, she was used to the demands of Leonardo's empire. She went on her trip, never suspecting the undercurrents of deception that swirled around her husband. During her brief stay in Chicago, Clarissa received a baffling phone call from a close friend, unsettling rumors about Leonardo's presence at the Four Seasons Hotel back in Manhattan. The friend's words were laced with concern, but Clarissa shrugged it off. Leonardo was likely just meeting clients in an extravagant venue. That was nothing new. Still, a knot of anxiety formed in her chest. There was no real evidence or reason to suspect him of wrongdoing, until fate intervened, placing her on a collision course with revelations that would redefine her world. At 32, Leonardo Quinn was the kind of man who seemed to wear success like an inherited privilege, though he'd built it from the ground up. Raised in a modest household, he once vowed never to let hardship dictate his life. He worked 2 jobs in college and hunkered down in university libraries until dawn, poring over books on economics, coding, and business strategies. His first startup failed miserably, but it paved the way for lessons that fueled his next venture. Soon enough, major investors took notice, and by the time he was 30, he was shaking hands with venture capitalists who saw in him a bright, unstoppable force. Wealth came swiftly, and so did temptations. Lavish parties, new social circles, and an endless parade of admirers who treated him like a rock star. Yet, Leonardo always believed he remained anchored by his love for Clarissa. She was his high school sweetheart turned life partner, the only person who'd seen him at his worst and loved him nonetheless. However, power has a way of exposing the smallest cracks in one's character, making it nearly impossible to resist the siren songs of forbidden desires. Enter Evelyn Locke, a brilliant marketing executive who'd caught Leonardo's eye during a corporate fundraiser. Intelligent, captivating, and confident, she was a woman who could read boardrooms as easily as a children's book. When they first exchanged business cards, it was purely professional. Leonardo needed someone with Evelyn's savvy to elevate his company's brand globally. But late nights in the office blossomed into laughter, easy banter, and a magnetic tension that neither acknowledged outright. They went from discussing marketing strategies to sharing personal anecdotes about their ambitions, dreams, and hidden fears. Evelyn understood Leonardo's unspoken doubts about fatherhood, about whether he could measure up to the world's expectations while also caring for a family. Their emotional intimacy turned into a precarious slope, one that led to an accidental brush of the hand. Then a meaningful gaze held a second too long. Clarissa remained blissfully unaware of the deepening rapport between them. Her mind was occupied with designing the nursery, searching for the perfect shade of pastel blue or pink, and browsing through baby name books. Meanwhile, Leonardo found himself entangled in an internal battle, torn between his loyalty to Clarissa and the spark that ignited whenever he encountered Evelyn. Little did he realize that the public veneer of his marriage and the empire he had built would soon be overshadowed by shadows of his own making, a transgression that threatened to destroy everything he held dear. In Chicago, Clarissa's time was spent in back-to-back meetings with top-tier clients. She was an accomplished financial consultant who had carved out a name for herself in a highly competitive industry. One morning, as she was heading to the convention center, her phone buzzed. It was the same close friend who'd hinted at seeing Leonardo at the Four Seasons Hotel. This time, the voice on the other end was more urgent, thick with worry. "Clarissa, the first, so sorry to bother you again," the friend began, "but I had to call. I saw Leonardo last night at the Four Seasons lounge with a woman. They seemed very close." For a moment, Clarissa's world wobbled on its axis. She could practically feel her heart trip inside her chest. She tried to maintain composure. "Thank you for telling me," she whispered, and ended the call. She attempted to dismiss the swirling anxiety, reminding herself that Leonardo frequently met high-profile individuals. Perhaps this was a simple business negotiation, but doubt had now sunk its claws into her mind. She thought back to Leonardo's recent behaviors, the nights he claimed he had to work late, the sudden phone calls he took in private, or how he sometimes seemed distracted when she tried to talk about the baby. At the time, she had chalked it up to the stress of running a multi-billion-dollar company. Now, worry gnawed at the edges of her thoughts. That evening, Clarissa returned to her hotel room and found herself unable to focus on the conference. She kept replaying every instance that might hint at Leonardo's betrayal. Then came the most crucial moment of her Chicago trip. She discovered that a new client meeting scheduled for the following day had been abruptly cancelled, freeing her earlier than expected. With a sudden wave of determination, she decided she would fly back to Manhattan that very night. Despite being exhausted and 6 months pregnant, Clarissa booked a last-minute ticket. Exhaustion gave way to adrenaline. She needed answers from Leonardo himself. Her thoughts spiraled from heartbreak to anger and back again. Yet a flicker of hope remained. Perhaps it was all a misunderstanding. She clung to that possibility like a lifeline. Boarding the plane, she barely noticed the hum of the engines or the bustle of flight attendants. All she could think about was seeing Leonardo looking into his eyes and trying to discern the truth. The truth, she feared, would change the course of her life forever. Evelyn Locke had never considered herself the kind of woman to get involved with a married man. As a career-oriented individual, she prided herself on her professional integrity and independent lifestyle. Yet somewhere along the line, her admiration for Leonardo Quinn, the mercurial entrepreneur, blurred the lines between respect and desire. She told herself she wasn't out to steal anyone's husband. If anything, she was simply enjoying the sparks of an undeniable connection. But that night at the Four Seasons Hotel bar, something in the air felt different. They had just finalized a major deal with international investors, one that promised to expand Leonardo's empire into new markets. Their success demanded a celebration. One glass of champagne led to another, and soon they found themselves laughing in a secluded corner, their heads inclined close together. Evelyn's heart thumped with an unusual mixture of exhilaration and guilt. Leonardo seemed restless, as though balancing on the edge of an invisible precipice. He mentioned Clarissa's trip to Chicago, but quickly changed the topic whenever the subject of fatherhood arose. Evelyn read the conflict in his eyes, a mixture of longing and fear. In that moment, he was the furthest from his public persona as a suave billionaire. He seemed achingly human and haunted. They clinked glasses in a toast to new beginnings, and that was when Evelyn noticed Leonardo's gaze linger on her lips. An electrifying current surged between them. She should have pulled away, walked out before things escalated. But the champagne's effervescence and the late hour conspired against caution. The manager approached discreetly, asking if they wanted to move to a more private lounge area. Leonardo paused, searching Evelyn's face for affirmation. She nodded, unable to resist the unspoken invitation. They rose from their chairs, leaving behind half-empty glasses, heading toward a plush suite. He'd booked for an evening of business calls that had now taken a personal turn. Inside the suite, the city lights glimmered through panoramic windows. Leonardo poured another round of champagne, his hand trembling slightly. They stood by the window, silent for a long moment, absorbing the tension and the unvoiced question, "Are we really doing this?" Their first kiss was tentative, an exploration. Then it became insistent, passion mingled with a tinge of desperation. Neither realized how fate was already in motion, carrying them on a collision course with consequences that would descend upon them sooner than they ever imagined. Clarissa's plane touched down at LaGuardia close to midnight. Jet-lagged and emotionally spent, she considered heading straight home, but the nagging suspicion fueled by her friend's sightings propelled her toward the Four Seasons Hotel. She was already in a taxi before she had time to second-guess her decision. The city's lights blurred past in a streak of neon and midnight hues. Inside the cab, Clarissa's hands gripped her phone, ready to call Leonardo. She hesitated. If she was wrong, if he was just meeting investors or consultants, would confronting him so abruptly damage the trust they had built? But the alternative, ignoring her gut, felt like betrayal of her own instincts. She needed certainty. The taxi pulled up to the towering facade of the hotel. Elegantly dressed doorman nodded politely as Clarissa, heart pounding, stepped out onto the polished marble floor of the lobby. Soft classical music played in the background, contrasting with the tempest raging in her mind. She approached the reception desk, feigning composure. "Excuse me, my husband is staying here, Leonardo Quinn. Could you please let him know that I've arrived?" The receptionist, maintaining a professional smile, typed into the computer. "I'm sorry, ma'am, but Mr. Quinn has instructed that he's not to be disturbed tonight." Clarissa's heart seized. Something about the phrasing, "not to be disturbed," sent alarm bells ringing. Yet she took a steadying breath. "I understand, but it's urgent. Could you just ring his suite for me?" Reluctantly, the receptionist dialed. After a moment she hung up. "There's no answer, Miss S. Quinn." Clarissa offered a tight smile. "Perhaps I'll wait in the lounge area." Without waiting for permission, she walked toward the elevators. A passing bellhop, catching her expression of quiet determination, hesitated. She nodded, and he turned away, unwilling to meddle. Riding the elevator, each floor that lit up felt like a countdown to cataclysm. Upon reaching Leonardo's suite level, the hallway was eerily silent. Clarissa's heart hammered as she approached the door. She tried her keycard. Leonardo had given her a universal card for all his suites in the city, a convenience they'd occasionally used for personal getaways. To her surprise, it clicked open. Inside, the lights were low, the air suffused with the faint scent of perfume that wasn't hers. Palms sweaty, Clarissa ventured further, dread coursing through her veins. What she found in that dimly lit room would break her world apart. Leonardo and Evelyn lay in the tangle of sheets, lulled by the ambient glow of the city. They both knew this fragile paradise couldn't last, that the bubble of stolen moments would burst the moment dawn arrived. Yet they clung to it, if only for a breath longer, as if wanting to pause time. Suddenly the suite door opened. Clarissa stepped in, her silhouette frozen at the threshold. The gasp that slipped from her lips was barely audible, but it ricocheted with thunderous force in that intimate space. Leonardo jolted upright. His eyes, still hazy from wine and drowsiness, met Clarissa's, registering equal parts panic and disbelief. Evelyn scrambled to cover herself, her face blanching in horror. The pregnant wife and the mistress locked eyes in a moment that lasted forever. Neither woman spoke, but the air crackled with guilt and betrayal. Leonardo swung his legs off the bed, stammering as he tried to form words, any words to explain the inexcusable. Clarissa, IMTHI's isn't, please. Let me, he stopped, realizing there was nothing he could say to mend the damage. The betrayal stood exposed in the most unforgiving way possible. Clarissa stared at him, tears burning in her eyes. She wanted to scream, to lash out physically, but she felt paralyzed, as though her entire being had gone numb. In one slow, deliberate motion, she looked at Evelyn. "Who are you?" Clarissa asked, her voice trembling. "I, Evelyn," the younger woman managed to reply. She clutched the sheets around her, terror etched in every line of her face. I'm sorry." Clarissa's eyes flickered between the two of them. The pain was too immense to process all at once. Leonardo took a step toward her, arms half raised as if to embrace her. She took a step back, as though his touch would contaminate her with the betrayal. "How long?" Clarissa's voice was raw, each syllable a plea and an accusation rolled into one. Leonardo's eyes fell to the floor. He couldn't bring himself to speak. Evelyn's eyes brimmed with tears, but no words came out either. In that silence, Clarissa felt something shift within her, a sense of disbelief slowly crystallizing into cold, clear anger. She turned and walked out, ignoring Leonardo's desperate call. She made it to the hallway before she staggered, placing a hand protectively over her swelling belly. Trembling from head to toe, she realized one horrifying truth. She had to protect not only her heart, but the child who lay inside her. Clarissa fled the suite, tears burning her eyes, stumbling toward the elevator. Every footstep echoed through the lavish corridor like a mocking drumbeat. A sharp pain flared in her abdomen, a reminder of her fragile pregnancy. She clung to the wall, breathing through the surge of emotion, forcing herself to stay composed for the sake of the baby. Downstairs in the lobby, well-heeled guests and staff moved gracefully across the marble floor, oblivious to the heartbreak playing out in Clarissa's life. She rushed out of the hotel and into the buzzing Manhattan night, the warm air feeling suffocating against her skin. Cars honked, neon signs flashed, and the world spun on, indifferent to her devastation. She hailed a cab, no clear destination in mind beyond away from here. The taxi driver took one look at her tear-streaked face and quietly turned off the radio. Clarissa's heart hammered as she thought of Leonardo and Evelyn, likely still in that room, entangled in guilt. The image stabbed at her like a hot blade. As the taxi merged into traffic, Clarissa realized she couldn't return to their penthouse. She couldn't bear to be surrounded by memories of happier times, the baby's ultrasound pictures taped on the fridge, or the half-assembled crib in the guest room. She needed space. She needed solace. She directed the cab driver to the Ritz-Carlton in Central Park, another real estate investment Leonardo had once considered purchasing. At least it was a familiar enough location, and Clarissa could check in under her own name. Upon arrival, she stumbled into the hotel lobby, stifling sobs as she approached the front desk. Inside her temporary refuge, Clarissa dropped onto the bed, still wearing her travel clothes. The plush surroundings felt cold and alien. The enormity of the betrayal hit her again, and she wept until no more tears would come. Anger, heartbreak, confusion, and fear all churned in her chest. Eventually, she forced herself to confront the next practical steps. Leonardo was the father of her unborn child, a fact that wouldn't change no matter how much she wished it could. She could demand a separation, a divorce. She could vanish from his life with whatever resources she had. But did she have the emotional strength and the legal footing to do so? A new wave of grief welled up. Clarissa's entire life, meticulously built around trust and partnership, had been dismantled in one crushing moment. And she couldn't help but think, if Leonardo was capable of this, what other secrets lurked beneath his polished exterior? Leonardo stood in the hotel suite, feeling an invisible noose tighten around his neck. Evelyn was in the bathroom, hastily pulling on her clothes and sobbing. The shock of Clarissa's discovery still reverberated in the air, each particle saturated with guilt and terror. He paced around the room, running a hand through his hair, his mind trapped in an endless loop. Clarissa's agonized face, the glint of tears in her eyes, and her trembling hand resting protectively over her pregnant belly. "I need to go after her," he said aloud, barely aware he'd spoken. Evelyn emerged, mascara smudged, eyes red. She looked at him with a mixture of regret, longing, and fear. "She's your wife, Leonardo," she whispered, voice trembling. "Go." He snatched his jacket from a nearby chair and tore out of the suite. The elevator ride down felt excruciatingly slow, each second ticking against his eardrums like a time bomb. Arriving at the lobby, he scanned the area, only to realize Clarissa was long gone. Exiting onto the sidewalk, he dialed her number repeatedly. No response. He left frantic voicemails. "Clarissa, please pick up. We need to talk. I'm so sorry." At that moment, a paparazzo lurking near the entrance recognized the billionaire and snapped a series of photos, capturing Leonardo's anguished expression. Leonardo, usually so adept at handling the press, barely registered the camera's clicks. All that mattered was finding Clarissa. He tried calling her again. Still nothing. Desperate, he scrolled through his contacts and reached out to her closest friends. Some didn't answer. Others claimed not to know where she was. One friend, obviously furious, hissed, "You've done enough damage for one night," and hung up. Returning to the Four Seasons, Leonardo found Evelyn waiting in the lobby. Without exchanging a word, he headed back to the suite, phone still in hand, as if expecting Clarissa to magically call. Evelyn trailed behind, her gaze downcast. Once inside, the reality of their situation loomed large. "I should have stopped this," Leonardo muttered, sinking into a chair. "I never wanted to hurt her, not like this." Evelyn placed a trembling hand on his shoulder. "I didn't want this either, but it happened, and we have to deal with it." Leonardo nodded, feeling the weight of what deal with it would entail. For years, he'd managed to keep his business dealings neat, always landing on his feet. But in the realm of personal betrayal, he was hopelessly unprepared, and now he was about to face consequences that not even his billions could ward off. Morning light filtered through the curtains of Clarissa's room at the Ritz-Carlton. She hadn't slept. She dozed off for moments, only to awaken in a panic, replaying the night's horror in her mind. Despite the exhaustion, her thoughts were crystal clear about one thing: life, as she knew it, was irrevocably changed. A soft knock at the door startled her. Tentatively, she opened it to find her friend, one of the few she'd confided in, standing there with a bag of essentials. Word had spread among her close circle that Clarissa was in crisis, and they rallied to offer emotional and logistical support. Her friend entered and hugged her gently, mindful of the pregnancy. "I've brought some clothes and toiletries from your place. I hope that's okay. Leonardo wasn't there when I stopped by." Clarissa nodded, tears stinging her eyes again. "Thank you. I'm not ready to see him. Not yet." They sat by the window overlooking Central Park, where the trees swayed in the morning breeze. Over a cup of chamomile tea, Clarissa confided the heartbreaking details of her discovery. The friend listened intently, occasionally offering comforting words or a supportive squeeze of her hand. "Do you have a lawyer?" her friend asked gently. "I mean, this is a big deal, Clarissa. You have to think about your future, about the baby's future." Clarissa closed her eyes, the legalities rushing into her mind. Prenuptial agreements, custody battles, media scrutiny. It was overwhelming. But as she opened her eyes and looked at the serene park outside, she felt a spark of resolve. "I'll find one. Today. I can't stand by and pretend this didn't happen." Later that morning, Clarissa picked up her phone and scrolled through her contacts, finally settling on a high-powered attorney she'd met at a charity event. The attorney specialized in high-profile divorces and had a reputation for being fiercely protective of her clients. Within hours, Clarissa was seated in a private office, detailing her marriage's unraveling. The attorney listened, occasionally taking notes. By the end of the consultation, Clarissa felt a measure of empowerment. There was a plan still in its infancy, but something to cling to in a sea of uncertainty. Leaving the law firm, Clarissa realized she was embarking on a war she never wanted to fight. But to protect herself and her unborn child, she had no choice. If Leonardo Quinn had shattered the trust they had built, then she would do whatever necessary to salvage her dignity and her future without him. Leonardo hadn't left his penthouse in 48 hours, consumed by guilt and the fallout from the tabloids. The press had wasted no time speculating about the other woman he'd been seen with at the Four Seasons Hotel. Gossip columns spun lurid tales of a scandal that threatened to overshadow the business triumphs he'd achieved over the years. His phone buzzed ceaselessly. Anxious investors, board members alarmed by the negative press, and friends desperate to hear his side of the story. But all Leonardo wanted was to talk to Clarissa. He'd lost count of how many messages he left her, each one more desperate than the last. She hadn't responded to a single one. The memory of her anguished eyes cut deeper than any public humiliation ever could. He'd always imagined that if he stayed morally upright in business, he could overlook small personal missteps. But this was no small misstep. This was a breach of trust that defied repair. Even as he paced the marble floors, a part of him burned with shame for not having the self-control to resist temptation. On the third day, Evelyn called. Leonardo stared at his phone, debating whether to answer. Their brief affair was now the centerpiece of a catastrophic scandal, and he felt an odd mixture of resentment and responsibility toward her. He finally picked up. "What do we do now?" she asked, voice trembling. Leonardo's throat tightened. He blamed himself for dragging her into this mess. She was complicit, sure, but he was the married one. "I don't know," he said honestly. "I need to focus on Clarissa and my child." A brief silence. He could hear Evelyn's breath catch. "I understand," she said finally. "I never wanted to ruin your marriage." "Neither did I," Leonardo muttered, though he knew his actions belied that statement. When the call ended, he sank into a chair, mind spinning. The future he'd envisioned one where Clarissa stood by his side as they raised a family felt increasingly distant. He thought of his unborn child, filled with dread at the possibility that he might never be the father he aspired to be. Regret throbbed like an open wound. That evening, his corporate legal team forwarded a letter from Clarissa's new attorney, indicating her intent to seek a separation and possibly full custody of their child. Leonardo felt his world tilt on its axis. He might wield power in boardrooms and investor meetings, but here he was utterly defenseless, with the spectre of losing his wife and child looming like an impending storm. Clarissa remained ensconced at the Ritz-Carlton, forging a precarious existence between prenatal checkups and meetings with her newly hired legal team. The once happy expectancy of motherhood had dimmed under the weight of betrayal, yet her child's future was now her singular priority, guiding her every decision. Her attorney advised her to remain calm, focus on her well-being, and keep a record of all communications from Leonardo. She did just that, reading and archiving each of his frantic text messages, which ranged from abject apologies to desperate pleas for a conversation. Yet she found no solace in his words. Trust was not so easily restored. One afternoon, Clarissa ventured out for a scheduled ultrasound. The crisp autumn air bit gently at her cheeks as she exited the hotel. She took a private car to her OB/GYN's office on the Upper East Side. Sitting in the waiting room, she felt a wave of sadness. This milestone, seeing her baby on the ultrasound, should have been shared with Leonardo by her side, marveling at the tiny miracle they'd created together. But the only other person she had with her was a close friend who gripped her hand supportively. As Clarissa lay on the exam table, the monitor flickered, revealing the silhouette of her baby. The doctor smiled, pointing out the delicate curve of the spine and the fluttering heartbeat. Despite her turmoil, Clarissa's eyes welled with tears of love and protectiveness for the life growing inside her. In that moment, she felt a surge of fierce resolve. She would be both mother and father, if that's what it took. After the appointment, Clarissa paused in the corridor, phone in hand, thinking about whether she should send Leonardo the ultrasound photo. Despite her anger, a trace of compassion for the father of her child remained. In a moment of internal conflict, she decided against it. Not yet. The wound was still too fresh, and she feared that even a small gesture might weaken her resolve. Returning to the Ritz-Carlton suite that evening, Clarissa slipped the ultrasound print into her purse and gazed out at the city lights. Leonardo's repeated mistakes, she reflected, had led them here. And while forgiveness might be possible one day, trust would take far longer to rebuild if it ever could. For now, she would guard her heart like a fortress, shielding her child from a betrayal she never saw coming. Across town, in the hushed sanctum of Leonardo's corporate offices, the fallout from his personal scandal was beginning to take a tangible toll. The board of directors convened an emergency meeting to discuss damage control. Investors, spooked by the negative media attention, were questioning his leadership and hinting at possible withdrawal of funds. In a stark sign of crisis, shares of his flagship company took a noticeable dip, wiping millions off its market capitalization. Leonardo entered the meeting with dark circles under his eyes. Where he once projected unwavering confidence, he now carried an air of defeat. Executives exchanged cautious glances, unsure how to proceed. After the formalities, one board member finally voiced the question on everyone's mind. "Leonardo, can you assure us that your personal affairs won't jeopardize this company any further?" He cleared his throat, fighting the urge to lash out at the corporate formality in which even the greatest personal tragedy was boiled down to affairs. Summoning composure, he replied, "I'm taking steps to resolve the situation. My wife's well-being and that of my unborn child are my top priorities. I can assure you this company remains in good hands." Murmurs rippled around the table. Another board member, an older gentleman with a stern expression, said quietly, "Your top priority right now should be safeguarding the company's interests. We've seen CEOs taken down by scandals before, and we have a duty to protect shareholder value." Leonardo exhaled, nodding. He understood that in their world, scandal was a liability, but he also couldn't deny that Clarissa and the baby overshadowed everything else in his mind. Nevertheless, he had to maintain an image of control. "I'll do whatever it takes to ensure the stability of this company," he said. That afternoon, he emerged from the boardroom feeling hollow. His phone buzzed incessantly calls from PR advisors, journalists seeking statements, and well-meaning acquaintances offering half-hearted condolences. He ignored them all, stepping into his private office and locking the door behind him. Slumping into his chair, he stared at a framed photo of Clarissa on his desk. Taken during a ski trip in Aspen, her eyes bright, her smile genuine. Remorse gnawed at him. For all his billions, he felt poorer than ever. The life he had tirelessly built, his marriage, his business empire seemed fragile, teetering on the brink of collapse. And he had no one to blame but himself. Meanwhile, Evelyn tried to carry on with her career at the marketing firm, though her workplace had become a minefield of whispered gossip and sideways glances. Her talent, once respected, was now overshadowed by her involvement with a married billionaire. She overheard hushed conversations labeling her a homewrecker and a gold digger, barbs that stung fiercely despite her attempts to remain outwardly composed. One afternoon, her boss requested a private meeting. Closing the office door, he offered a tight-lipped smile. "Evelyn, we value your contributions here, but the media attention, it's affecting morale. Some of our clients are uncomfortable with the publicity." Her cheeks burned. She understood the implication. She was now a liability. "I see," she replied quietly, fighting the urge to break down. "Is there a severance package, or—" He cleared his throat, avoiding eye contact. "We'd be willing to offer a generous package if you choose to depart voluntarily. It might be best for all parties." She left the meeting with a termination agreement in hand, not officially fired, but pushed into resignation. It was a bitter pill to swallow, made even more painful by the realization that her personal choices had far-reaching repercussions. She had worked hard to climb the corporate ladder, only to have it all crumble because she allowed herself to get involved with Leonardo Quinn. Unemployed and embroiled in scandal, Evelyn retreated to her small Manhattan apartment. The hush of the four walls felt oppressive. She flipped through job listings, aware that her name linked to the ongoing tabloids could dissuade potential employers. Her phone beeped with notifications from social media, a barrage of strangers' hateful comments. The internet, it seemed, had already judged and condemned her. Desperate, she called Leonardo. When he answered, she could hear the tension in his voice. "I lost my job," she said, her tone a mixture of anger and sorrow. He paused. "I'm sorry, Evelyn, truly, but you have to understand I'm fighting my own battles here." In that instant, Evelyn realized that the fragile intimacy they'd shared was disintegrating under the harsh light of real-world consequences. Whatever illusions she had about becoming a cherished partner in Leonardo's life evaporated. He was focused on salvaging what remained of his marriage and his public image. Feeling abandoned and ostracized, Evelyn stared at the termination papers. She had no illusions left. She was alone, with nothing but regret as her companion and no path to redemption but the one she would have to forge on her own. In the weeks that followed, Clarissa moved from the Ritz-Carlton into a furnished apartment. Her attorney had arranged, tucked away in a quiet neighborhood on the Upper West Side. The relative anonymity provided her a semblance of peace. She continued meeting with her legal team, drafting separation papers and grappling with custody terms. Though she felt an underlying sadness every time the topic of shared custody arose, she recognized the importance of establishing clear boundaries for the child's future. Each day brought a new challenge, the morning sickness that lingered longer into her pregnancy, the media outlets still eager to exploit her tragedy, and the emotional whiplash from friends who took sides, some loyal to her, others swayed by Leonardo's pleas or simply fascinated by the drama. Still, Clarissa found solace in small acts of self-care. She took walks by the Hudson River, letting the rhythmic current remind her that life, too, must flow forward. She meditated in her temporary living room, focusing on the fragile, beautiful life growing inside her. Slowly, she rediscovered pockets of inner strength she never knew she possessed. One late afternoon, she received a letter in her mailbox. The handwriting on the envelope was elegant, though unfamiliar. Opening it, she discovered a note from Evelyn. Curiosity warred with anger as she read, "Clarissa, the first no, I'm the last person you want to hear from, but I need to apologize. I never intended for things to go this far. I realize now that my actions had consequences I can't undo. This doesn't fix anything, but I wanted you to know how deeply I regret my part in causing you pain." Evelyn Clarissa's first impulse was to tear the letter to shreds. She despised Evelyn for intruding on her marriage. Yet a flicker of empathy arose. Evelyn, too, seemed to be suffering. Clarissa placed the letter in a drawer, unsure whether to respond. Some days, the fury toward Evelyn threatened to consume her. Other days, she recognized that Leonardo was ultimately the one who'd broken his vows. That evening, she attended a prenatal yoga class. As she breathed in and out, focusing on the present moment, she felt a faint kick from her baby, a gentle reminder that her life extended beyond this painful chapter. With each breath, Clarissa silently reaffirmed her resolve. She would not let betrayal define her. Her child's future was her guiding star, and she was determined to steer them both toward a brighter horizon. Leonardo's once bustling penthouse now felt like an echo chamber of his own regrets, where Clarissa's laughter and the promise of a growing family once filled the spaces. A suffocating silence now reigned. Even his staff, housekeepers, chefs, security tread lightly, as if afraid to stir the boiling pot of tension. After weeks of unreturned calls, Leonardo decided on a more direct approach. He would pay a visit to Clarissa's attorney. If he couldn't reach her heart, at least he could attempt a legal route to communicate his willingness to make amends. Stepping into the law firm's glass tower, Leonardo felt a sense of dread. He was used to controlling negotiations, always having the upper hand. Now he was a man on the defensive, hoping to salvage scraps of goodwill. The attorney received him in a sleek conference room. As he waited, he noticed pictures of the attorney's previous high-profile clients, celebrities, politicians, other titans of industry. More than ever, Leonardo grasped that this was a different kind of battlefield, one in which his wealth was not necessarily an advantage but a factor that could deepen the stakes. When the attorney arrived, she was polite but cool. "Mr. Quinn, how can I assist you today?" Leonardo cleared his throat. "I want you to tell Clarissa that I'm willing to do whatever she needs, financially, emotionally. I'd like us to talk, privately." The attorney folded her hands. "Mrs. Quinn has given clear instructions that all communication is to go through me. She needs time, and she needs to feel safe. If you wish to convey an offer or a statement, I can deliver it to her." He swallowed, feeling a pang. "I understand. Could you please let her know that I'd like to meet in a neutral setting, with or without counsel present, just to discuss the baby's future?" She nodded. "I will relay your request. However, please be prepared that she may decline." Leonardo left the meeting with a heavy heart. On the drive back, he gazed out the window at the Manhattan skyline, an empire he had once thought he ruled. Yet for all the towers with his name or funding behind them, he found no refuge for his battered conscience. At a traffic light, his driver announced that shares of his company had dropped further amid rumors of corporate restructuring. Leonardo merely nodded. The business empire could crumble for all he cared. The real loss had already occurred in a single, heartbreaking moment. A few more weeks passed before Clarissa finally agreed to meet Leonardo in person. Even then, she set strict conditions. The meeting would take place at her attorney's office, with her legal team present. Leonardo, desperate for any chance to see her, agreed without hesitation. On the day of the meeting, Clarissa arrived in a tailored maternity dress, her posture straighter than ever, a quiet determination etched into her features. She looked calm, but inside, her emotions whirled like a tempest, part heartbreak, part resolve. Leonardo stood as she entered the conference room, his eyes immediately drawn to her baby bump. His chest tightened at the thought of the life he helped create. The attorneys facilitated the conversation. Leonardo expressed remorse, stumbling over his words in a way Clarissa had never seen before. Once a master communicator, he was now reduced to broken phrases laced with regret. Clarissa listened, her gaze steady, though unsmiling. When it was her turn, she spoke softly but firmly. "I won't pretend to understand why you did this, but I do know that our child deserves stability and love. Right now, I can't trust you to provide that." Leonardo's voice quivered. "I want to be part of our child's life. I'll prove to you that." Clarissa cut him off, tears threatening to surface. "Actions speak louder than words, Leonardo. All the wealth in the world can't repair what you broke. If you want to be a father, you'll have to earn that privilege. And it is a privilege, not a right." A tense silence followed. Legally, he had paternal rights, but Clarissa's words underscored a moral truth. Parenthood was more than a biological fact. It was a role that demanded trust, loyalty, and sacrifice. The attorneys agreed to draft a temporary custody arrangement for when the baby was born, subject to revision depending on Leonardo's behavior and Clarissa's comfort. Visitation, support, every detail was meticulously recorded. After the meeting, Leonardo tried to catch Clarissa alone in the hallway. She paused but didn't look him in the eye. "I'm sorry," he whispered, voice cracking. She inhaled, steadying herself. "Sorry doesn't fix it. I have to think about what's best for me and the baby." She walked away, leaving Leonardo standing in the corridor, the echo of her footsteps a haunting reminder of what he stood to lose if he failed to correct his course. And deep inside, he feared that no amount of penance would ever wash away his betrayal. In the following months, karma's reckoning began to manifest in Leonardo's life, and not merely in emotional terms. Corporate rivals he had once bested smelled blood in the water. They orchestrated strategic moves to weaken his hold on the market. One of his key investors pulled out of a major project, citing concerns about leadership stability. His stock prices continued to slump. Magazines that once showcased him on their covers now ran exposes, questioning whether his personal downfall was a reflection of deeper ethical failings. For the first time in his career, Leonardo found himself fighting a war on multiple fronts: a crumbling marriage, a deteriorating public image, and an empire on shaky ground. Through it all, he wrestled with guilt, replaying the moment Clarissa caught him in that hotel suite, a moment that had torn the veneer off his perfect life. He tried to handle the crisis with the same strategic acumen he applied to business. He replaced PR firms, cut deals with media outlets, and sought to pivot public attention to philanthropic efforts. Yet every charitable gesture felt hollow and calculated, leaving him empty inside. Meanwhile, Clarissa steadily forged her new path. As her due date approached, she moved into a more permanent residence, a comfortable, child-friendly apartment overlooking Riverside Park. She continued her financial consulting work part-time, having turned down several lucrative projects to focus on her pregnancy. Emotionally, she relied on her close friends, who organized baby showers and offered unwavering support. During this time, small acts of unexpected kindness emerged. Evelyn, still grappling with her own guilt, mailed Clarissa a second letter, this time enclosed with a gift card for a high-end baby boutique, scribbled with a note for the child. "I know I can't ever make things right, but please accept this for the baby's sake." Clarissa pondered whether to accept it. Ultimately, she decided to pay the gesture forward, donating the equivalent amount to a local shelter for single mothers. She felt that the best way to neutralize the negativity was to transform it into something positive. Finally, on a chilly winter morning, Clarissa went into labor. Her frantic call to her doctor and the subsequent rush to the hospital marked the start of a life-changing day. She had chosen not to inform Leonardo of her due date, wanting to avoid additional stress. But fate, it seemed, had other plans, as Leonardo would soon discover, and his reaction, whether redemptive or further damning, would shape the final outcome of his greatest test. Clarissa's contractions intensified as she arrived at the hospital, her body racked with pain, yet buoyed by the fierce determination that only a mother can summon. She clutched the hand of her closest friend, who had volunteered to be her birthing partner. Nurses guided her into a delivery room where monitors beeped gently, offering a sterile sanctuary from the chaos that had engulfed her life in recent months. In the quiet moments between contractions, Clarissa found her thoughts drifting to Leonardo. Would he have wanted to be here, holding her hand, supporting her through each wave of pain? She quickly banished the thought, reminding herself that his choices had led them down separate paths. This birth was a sacred moment between her and her child. Meanwhile, word of Clarissa's hospitalization reached Leonardo through an unlikely source, a nurse who happened to be a distant relative of one of his board members. He dropped everything, a high-stakes investor meeting, a looming conference call, and raced to the hospital. Adrenaline surged through his veins, mingled with fear and a flicker of hope. Perhaps he could be there in time for the baby's arrival. Perhaps he could take his first step toward redemption by supporting Clarissa at her most vulnerable. Arriving at the hospital, Leonardo sprinted to the maternity ward, ignoring the curious stares of passers-by who recognized the billionaire from magazine covers. At the reception desk, he pleaded for Clarissa's room number. The nurse, aware of the tension, hesitated before finally relenting. "Room 412, she said softly. Heart pounding, Leonardo approached the door. Through a small window he could see Clarissa, sweat-drenched and mid-contraction, her friend by her side. The raw intensity of childbirth played out in front of him, and he suddenly felt an outsider to an event that should have been intimately his to witness. He knocked gently. The friend opened the door halfway, shielding Clarissa from view. "She doesn't want to see you," the friend whispered. "This is not your moment anymore." Leonardo's eyes burned with unshed tears. He peered into the room, seeing Clarissa's contorted face as she pushed, the doctor encouraging her, the lights reflecting off the instruments. In the background, a baby's first cry tore through the air, a sound so pure and powerful that it shattered any illusions of self-pity in Leonardo's mind. He sank against the corridor wall, tears streaming down his face. The child was here, the one. Hope he had left. Yet he stood on the outside, a witness to life's most miraculous moment, barred from entering by the very woman whose trust he'd destroyed. This story reminds us how the strongest empires can be toppled by a single betrayal, and how even the wealthiest among us are not immune to life's harsh lessons. Leonardo's downfall became a lesson in humility. Clarissa's resilience proved that a broken heart could still beat for something greater than pain, her child's future. and the ripple effect of their decisions changed more lives than they ever anticipated. If you found yourself captivated by Clarissa's determination or touched by the weight of Leonardo's remorse, consider showing your support. Give this video a thumbs up, share it with friends who love a gripping drama, and subscribe to the channel for more stories that delve into the depths of human emotion. Your engagement helps us continue exploring the raw, complicated beauty of life, one story at a time. Your voice matters, and we'd love to have you join our growing community.